me, yes, the one and all Paul friends, welcoming you to Starfleet Universe on call. And tonight, well, we have Gary. Hi, Gary.
Hello.
We have Jeff. Hey, Jeff.
Good evening.
And we have Doug. How you doing, Doug?
Hello, how you doing?
Doing good, doing good. Before we start the topic for this evening, I just want to do a quick, and I do mean quick, review of my round one game in the Sapphire Star tournament. Basically, game turn one, he came in, I came in. He launched two 30-point torps. I guess one was pseudo. I guess right. I then headed over. I fired it and headed away, and it hit. Yeah, I let it hit my, I think, shield number one. No, I think that was shield number 5. No, shield number 1. She hit shield number 1. I then headed away because I didn't want him coming in on me. And then I actually no. Before then, I actually hit him with my overloads at range 4, in 4 Phaser 1s. And then range on turn 2, we both went running around. Actually, he launched a 60-point torpedo later in turn 1, and then I just kept on running. No, actually, no, he did that on turn 2. That's when I started, and I just ran, and we didn't have an interaction for like almost 2 turns. And then on turn 4, he centerlined me off my shield number 5, which actually wasn't too bad. And we both fired Impulse 31. I knocked down half his shield number 1, and he almost knocked down my shield number 5. Next turn, I did Star Castle for a little bit by first launching a Wild Weasel. He came around, and that's where everything went nuts because he came in fast and then just went around me, and he had another torpedo ready at that point. And I'm looking at this and going, okay, well, I got a problem because his torpedo's gonna hit me in the rear because I side castle, I tacked around, and then I started going off at like speed 8 because I figured I can't stay still for the whole turn because otherwise he'll stand still and then just tractor me or just knock down all my wild weasels and then finally kill me. Because he could have done that, and just, but I did a second hit, and actually I succeeded. And that's when I kind of had too many at the end of everything. That turn I just had too many internals, too much damage, and that was it. So I conceded at that point because I got half my 3 of my 4 particle cannons were gone. I was down to 2 shield crackers and 6 phaser 1s, and 2 phaser 3s. So it was not looking good for me. And he only had like 8 internals, so I conceded at that point. And I said that's a quick abbreviation. And to me, I think the reason I lost was because of turns 2 and 3. I needed to keep on this. Actually, mainly turn 3, because turn 2 I was running away from his 60-point plasma, which was fine. It's turn 3 where I didn't fire a thing until late in the turn. So I never got, he always was out maneuvering me. I never got around to get my nose towards him, so I could actually chase him down and fire at him at closer range, So that, I think, to me that was the key, because you need to keep on just pounding and pounding and pounding when you're going against a Romulan, just a Romulan KR, So I figured that, in my mind, I think that's where the big mistake was for that. Turn 4, I had no choice, and as it is, I think I did the best that I could for that turn, and I couldn't get enough internals because of turn number 3. I didn't knock down the shield enough, so I knocked out I knocked down half his shields basically, but still, I should have only knocked down like 2 of his shields and got a lot more internals. So, hi Chris. Okay, with that out of the way, done. As I said, it was going to be a quick one because I wanted to get on to the actual topic for this evening, at least the beginning of hopefully a series of podcasts. It might not be in succession, but there will be a series. Oh, and it's a reminder for you guys who are live and probably don't listen to the news portion. And that is, I will not be having a podcast next week, and I'm sure Gary knows why, and which is basically Thanksgiving is going to be here, and Lord knows my wife would kill me if I have a podcast instead of spending time with the family on Thanksgiving night. So, no podcast.
We'll politely excuse you just this once.
Thank you very much. So
spend time with. Okay.
Yeah, spend time with your family. Okay. Yeah. So.
Sure.
Well, I know you always spend time with your family too. So. Lord knows, I know Eric.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure he would not be too thrilled. Anywho, I'm sure. My guess is probably Jeff is going to still be on the road.
Sadly, I will be.
Figured as much. I know. Believe it or not, Jeff, you're the second truck driver that I know who plays SFB.
That's interesting.
Steve McCann.
Yeah.
Yeah, Steve
well,
McCann
that's them number. He'll be the third one, because that's Steve McCann. Steve McCann originally was an EMT, and then started doing truck driving. Before him, there was a guy named Clint, and he basically played by email. This is back in the days of play by email. And we converse back and forth. And actually, he was trying to. This is back in the day when they were looking for people to drive trucks in Iran. Iraq.
Oh wow!
In Iraq, they needed truck drivers, and he wanted to volunteer, and he couldn't. Medically, he couldn't pass the criteria for that. So it's okay. But at this point, I'm sure I feel pretty confident saying Clint's probably dead at this point. Lost contact with him many years ago. But anyway,
try looking him up on Facebook by name.
I have to
Never know.
That's true. I have to first find the old email address that I had for him and his name. I remember his first name was Clint, and his wife had a book store, and they had an AOL account which they used for the bookstore, and they would share it. It was like CC Book Nook or something like that, something along those lines. I forget the exact email address, AOL email address, but I'm sure I have it in the archive somewhere, because I keep. I'm trying to. That's one thing when I moved everything to my laptop. I'm trying to trim things down tremendously. As Doug knows, I trimmed down things around here. Gave Doug a load of games that I no longer play, but I don't want to really. I'm getting rid of from my own use anyway. But anyway, back to games, and we have at least around 40 minutes, if not a little bit longer, to discuss the history of what's happened in the Starfleet universe in the past 20 so years, uh, since I figured place to start, of course, is the Captain's Edition of SFB. That's a good starting point, because Captain's Edition of SFB, for those who've played SFB, and that was the first edition after the Commander's Edition. The Commander's Edition, for those who've played Starfleet Battles for way back in the day, that's when basically they had 3 volumes. They call them volumes of rules. Volume is, when it comes to amount of material, wasn't that large overall, but it had only focused on certain empires for each of the volumes. But and I do not remember which each volume focused on. So, because you had the first Commander's editions of the rules, and then you had Volume 1, Volume 2, and Volume 3. And then you could buy the modules. Modules are 1 through, I don't remember how many they had at the time.
I think it was 10. It was either 9 or 10, wasn't it? Or was it way more than that?
Oh, when they stopped making the Module R's, it was like 14. But I'm not sure what it was back in 1989. Because remember, that's one of the things that they did in the Captain's editions is they updated the graphics. They went from the stenciled look of the SSDs, where you had the outlines that were basically hand drawn outlines, not quite hand drawn, but they were templates, drafting templates that were used to actually draw the SSDs. And then after the Captain's edition, they went to computers and computerized SSDs, where they, oh yeah, okay. I did not know that, Chris. Chris mentioned that the volumes correspond to the 3 expansions of the Designer's Edition. I didn't know that the Designer's Edition had expansions. Actually, I think I did. I totally forgot. But anyway, that was one of the big things that happens in the Captain's Edition, is that in the Captain's Edition, they actually, did that change, and then they also took a lot of the rules and brought them together. Because one of the things that, if I recall correctly, with the volumes 1, 2, and 3, is that you actually had to kind of piece together the rulebook. Yeah, in fact, I feel pretty confident saying that we had to piece it together because of the different sections. Because you'd have, for each empire, you would have, in each section, some more G's, some more D, whatever, of those different sections for those rules. Of course, the funny part was when they actually produced like a volume, or even in the Captain's edition, they did this because the original basic rule book for the Captain's edition, they'd have references to rules that you didn't have, which is fine.
They still do that. They still do that.
Yeah.
Like if you buy basic and advanced and the master rule book, and you keep seeing references to something called Sabot plasma, you have to buy R10 to get the rules for it.
Oh yeah.
Actually, Plasma Sabo is in the 2012 edition of the Master Rulebook, so just to point that out.
Say that again? What was that, Gary?
The rules for Plasma Sabo are consolidated, part of the consolidated rules in the Silver Edition Master Rulebook that was first made available in 2012. So if you don't want to have to get our 10 separate because to have those rules, you can get them. They are consolidated together in the master rulebook.
That's what I would have thought, but I remember looking and not finding them.
They're in the PDF I have, because you can get the master rulebook from Warehouse 23. It should have the most updated version that ADB has made available. But I'm fairly sure that the Sable rules are in there. Because it also comes with all the rules from like module X1 and X1R, and then the ones from the 3Y era modules. What it doesn't have is they haven't yet consolidated the information from module C6, because they only have the early years weapons for the things like quantum wave torpedo and disruptor cannon, but the modern versions have yet to be put anywhere. So
there it is. Yeah, yep, it's right there in the master rule, the electronic version of the master rule book, FP11 Plasma Sabot.
Well, I guess I'll go looking again, because that's a huge PDF, and sometimes you don't always find what you're looking for the first time around.
Yeah, it's the rule is FP11. So, and then of course you have ECM plasma, which I think was introduced at the same time as the Sabot. Okay, let me bring that back.
I hadn't run into that reference yet. So you can jigger a plasma torpedo to function like a ECM drone. Is that the way that works?
ECM plasma?
Yeah.
Yeah. In that it follows the unit that launched it. Yeah, the rule FP12, which is the ECM plasma. An ECP generates 3 points of ECM function in that regards as an ECM drone. This includes all ECM drone rules, FD9, except as noted in FP12. Note that as unit cannot benefit from 2 ECM drones, it cannot benefit from 2 ECPs, or from 1 ECM drone and 1 ECP. This ECM generation uses ECCM generator included in all PPDs, and hence ECP cannot generate ECCM. And so forth. And of course, the ECP, that's interesting. An ECP has endurance of 96 impulses, which is 3 turns. Interesting. And an ECP does not cost any energy. Interesting. You gotta be chasing down a rabbit hole now, man. Really? Did you have to do this to me?
Whoops.
Okay, because I was wondering. Okay.
So, Paul, just while you're doing that, just go on a slight tangent. It's sort of worth mentioning that the 2022 edition of the Fed and Empire Advanced Operations Rulebook went up on Warehouse 23 this week, but it is still they're not going to commit it to print until they take a fresh round of reviews. So if anyone gets the PDF and sees something that they're not too sure about, they should go to the BBS and post errata notes in the thread that was created. And then that'll all get reviewed, and then it'll get formally, published once that's all factored in.
Yeah, what thread did they create for it? Is it like an after actions report?
It's if you go into the F&E section of the BBS, then there's a section for the so-called war book. Mm-hmm. And then under there's one for Advanced Operations 2022. And then there's a new thread that was just created like a day or two ago that basically says something like 15th November or 16th November thing. And
It's
then in
it's
there,
F&E Warbook.
people can.
Yeah, the title is F&E Warbook, subfolder StratCon 21 Update Advanced Operations, subfolder reports on 15 November PDF.
Okay. Okay, there it is. Got
That
it.
is correct, yes.
Got it. Huh. Interesting.
And just to go on the tangent just a little bit further, Advanced Ops is the module for F&E that introduced things like X ships and heavy war destroyers and so on. And the current rules have been back updated to account for some of the new units that were added to the game system in the tactical operations last year. So, for example, there's new mission types for the heavy war destroyers, particularly for the Federation. And there's new types of X ships and so forth that some of the rules are still in TAC Ops, but they send you to them in the new version of Advanced Ops. So but the only thing is that I don't believe there's ever going to be a formal single volume warbook that the way that there is for like the master rulebook in SFB or the reference rulebook in Fed Commander. It's just more the case that the warbook is more like it's to make sure that all of the rule books that exist to this date are kept up to date on a rolling basis, so that when new products get added, such as Civil Wars or Andromedan, the entire game system is none of the books basically fall behind too far from the others.
Right. Keep them consistent with one another and so forth. Yeah, I like the response from Chuck. Gary, that listing on the Fed SIT is a ghost, as there's no counter for the Fed HDWH. On the counter sheets Tango or Oscar, it was inadvertently listed early during development, but later confirmed by Steve Petrick that there cannot be a Fed HDW with 6 F111s, which would be kind of cool. It needs to be removed from the SIT. 6 F111s.
Well, actually, that topic came up again in 2021 when the TAC Ops counter sheet was being done up, and there was a note at that time saying that, in fact, the original rule that was in the Federation's Master Starship book about the F-111s being on heavy war destroyers was correct, but I didn't want to go into that tonight because that's, it's kind of a thing that kind of like, caused a lot of stress the last time that it came up, so I didn't really want to derail the podcast talking about it either because, it's not really a fair venue because there's anyway, so, but, sorry, I just, in any case, if there's anything else that people see in there that is worth posting, then I just wanted to highlight it so that they can go into the discussion thread and post their thoughts, and then try to, as I say, as part of the process of getting the rule set as up to date as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But although one final thing I'll say is this is kind of like, this is also, I guess, when it comes to trying to getting people up to speed in terms of what's been going on, this is kind of skipping ahead of it. But one of the current options that exists in Alpha Tactical Operations is for a Z variant of the HCW for the Federation, which includes 4 F-111 fighters and a pair of special sensors in the ship's option mounts. And that is because the other empires, like the Klingons and Romulans, are able to configure their heavy war destroyers or the advanced heavy war destroyers that are in Module X1R as PF tenders, so they can use them to hunt Andromedan satellite bases. So when Fed Empire eventually gets around to Andromedan War, those counters can be made to exist for those empires as in order to help them knock off the RTN. But for the Federation, because in the historical timeline they don't get to use PFs, the Z variant for the HDW is a further option for them that will basically allow them a single ship carrier that has additional combat power to be able to try to tackle a satellite base or at least hold up a larger Andro force in time for other ships to show up and cause it. So it's one of those things where, yes, players can use it now as like a raiding ship, I suppose, but its real value will hopefully come to fruition as and when the Andros are added to the FNE game system. So, but anyway, I want to not go down that rabbit hole too much further. So,
right. Oh, and yeah, agreed. We don't go chasing down that rabbit hole too far because we want to stay on topic for this evening. At the very least, at least have a good start. So yeah. So we have the captain's edition of the rules, and I figured that's a good place to start. And of course, during those incoming years, from the captain's edition when that was put out in 1989, that they continued to roll out module R's, and also additional module C's, modules C1, 2, and 3. And then module 3 was the one where that actually included the Andromedans and added the rules for the Andromedans into the set of rules. And because C4 was the training module, which had the shark hunters, the Frax, the barbarians, those kind of simulator races, the races that actually, I think, was it the Frax that actually became a real? I think the Frax is one of those ones that originally was not considered a real empire, but later on was considered a real empire.
No, they're still not real. It's just that they're the most well-developed.
I thought the Frax were a simulator race.
So they are. They actually have ships on Shapeways even, but they're just the ones that have been the most quickly to be converted to other game systems like Flight Commander and Call to Arms and such, because their rule sets are relatively easy.
Right.
And also earlier this year, there were a few sample SSDs and ship cards showing the quote-unquote friends of the Frax, which basically would be the same base hull, but what would you do if you gave it plasma torpedoes or gave it hellbores or anything like that, so that you're basically kind of representing, because the original Frax were designed to be in the academies of the Klingon, of the Deep Space Fleet. But if other empires were basically stealing those plans or copying them and wanted to work them up based on their own technology, what would those ships look like instead? So there have been a few sample heavy cruisers worked up in recent months that people can check out as hailing frequencies extras.
Oh.
But I should actually just point out as well, I think you said something about C3, because C2 is the one that introduced the Andromedans, but C3 is the one that introduced the Celtorians. And also was the first window open.
Okay. Oh, that was the Tholians. That was Neo-Tholians and the Celtorians. Okay, the webcaster. Okay.
Yeah. So the webcaster was in C2 with the ISC and the Andromedans, but the Celtorians and the Wind Cluster, the LDR, and then additional units for the Neo-Tholians and Andromedans were put into C3. In addition, because C3 comes with the rules for Celtorian particle cannons, it also gives you the rules that you need for the Neo-Tholians to use particle cannons instead of disruptors, so that you could, for the first time, play scenarios set in the Tholian home galaxy.
Right.
So, in a sense, both modules C2 and C3 together were basically ways to kind of introduce the concept of not just being in the alpha octants. So C2, of course, has Operation Unity, so technically speaking, when you're at the end of Unity and you're destroying the Star Desecrator, you're in the Lesser Magellanic Cloud. And then in C3, because it includes a scenario set around the time of the Celtorian Revolt, it for the first time allowed you to play scenarios in the home galaxy as well.
Right. Unfortunately, as we still feel that today, which is still pretty much limited to just the Celtorians and the Tholians, there aren't that many other ships for the Tholian Galaxy.
Well, there are, for anyone collecting Captain's Log, issue 40 comes with sample SSDs and chip cards for the Home Galaxy Pirate Raider and Pirate Destroyer.
Right.
And Captain's Log 41 includes an article that introduces the concept of the Home Galaxy Pirates in terms of like what they're about and how they function.
Mm-hmm.
And so between those two sources of data, there is the knowledge of an empire that has yet to be published called the Nebuline, who were a former enemy of the Tholians in the Home Galaxy. So in theory, if there was ever enough interest or effort to get a Home Galaxy module assembled together, the Nebuline and the Home Galaxy Pirates would be two of the factions that people could look forward to, as well as whoever else was out and about by the time the Tholians were still conquering the MA1 Galaxy. So.
Mm-hmm. Understood. Do you remember what was in C1? Was that the Lyrans?
C1 was the early wind cluster stuff, so before the fish ships were created.
Oh, okay.
It was basically when the wind still had the auxiliary freighters, as
Right.
well as the captured like Lyran and Xinti and Klingon ships and stuff. So
Right.
like the odds and ends, and also the wind and riders.
Right, and it had the rules for the
C1, yes, also introduced the.
Yeah, I was going to mention that.
Yeah.
Of course, Module C1 also included. They included those wind ships. Also include the radiation zone, and the effects of the radiation zone, and of course scenarios for some of those battles that happened when ships came out of the radiation zone and were fighting with the winds.
Yeah, because at the time, the first fish ship, I don't think it actually had even been designed yet, because based on the background or the behind-the-scenes material that's in Module C3, it's mentioned about how, I think it was Mark Kosho, I don't know how to pronounce it, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. He basically introduced, I think it was either the War Cruiser or the War Destroyer. He proposed it as a new ship for them. And in the process, he sparked the entire concept of giving the winds to fish ships, and also sparking the War of Return, because the wind history itself didn't actually go as far as what we now know or think of as the War of Return until C3 came along. So, and that also, of course, gives the Xintis a good chance to have another civil war. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting how, but at the time that these C modules were being created, they were, in a sense, basically helping to create the history as they went.
Mm-hmm.
So they were able to basically more fully flesh out, what was actually happening across the Alpha Octant, like whether it was the Romulan Civil War. I think that was in one of them. Was there scenarios for that in one of the modules? I don't remember, because the ISC were given a role in intervening during the Romulan Civil War. And so some of these, actually that was in Module X1, I'm thinking of Module X1. But yeah, so so basically during the 90s through to the interregnum, there's a lot of these products that were kind of placing strong building blocks in place in order to basically create the concept of the Alpha Octant as we know it today. So.
Understood. Yeah, I remember the original history of the wind when in Module C1 basically had it so that the winds, most part they had the freighters with the upgraded, because they're limited range and so forth. But also at that point they had basically pirate ships, because they allowed a pirate, what are they called? Oh,
Win Orions, the cluster cartel?
Cartel, that's it. Thank you. The cluster cartel to set up a base and within the cluster itself, and they created a shipbuilding within it, and as part of the deal of that was that the Orions, the cartel would give them some ships that were built from the shipbuilding facility that they created in the wind cluster. But they didn't have the special wind technology, the doubling of the engines and things like that, which was, to me, it was interesting. And then later on, with Module C3 came the whole War of Return, from the usurper, which made things.
And actually, one other thing, well, two things is it's worth noting that one of the other big leap forwards was the actual concept of the Federation and Empire map in and of itself, because in the earliest, like even in the Captain's Edition rulebook, the basic set rulebook, it's just kind of like a rough sketch that you show, that basically show where the Federation is and where the Klingons and Romulans are. It's pretty much like extracted from what had been in the Franz Josef technical manual. So Fed and Empire was like the first time that an actual detailed map from ISC space on one side all the way to Lyran and Hydron space on the other was put into being. Also, like in terms of like giving a clear sense of how far away the various planets were and the provinces, and I guess once you're using the rule system in FME, how fast it takes for you to get there, so that SFB could lean into that in terms of how to help kind of build the future history of the setting going forward. So, like things started to become a lot more synergistic in the sense that SFB and Fed and Empire could help feed each other's development in the sense that one could lead to new ships for the other, but then the other could basically help provide the framework by which even newer ships or bases or units or whatever could be understood. But on the flip side, Fed and Empire also, this is a thing that kind of, I think it was already a thing that was noticed prior to the interregnum, is that because of the creation of the Fed and Empire map, it basically locked the Alpha Octant into place, in the sense that the number of major empires that you see on that map, not counting the Andromedans, because they came later as invaders,
right,
but in the sense of permanent empires that exist somewhere in and around the FME hex map. Basically, the existence of FME means that that's it. So, because if a new empire was being added, say, off the map near Lyran space, then the Lyrans would need to create a border fleet to patrol that border. And then when the General War starts, they could take ships off that border and then use them to basically help kill the Xynths and Hydrons quicker. So the need to maintain game balance in FME was basically thrown out of whack. Wouldn't be thrown out of whack. So it pretty much meant that going forward, if you wanted to add new empires to the Alpha Octant, they had to either be in the simulator, like the Frax, or they had to be early empires that don't exist in a standard timeline, like the Parabians and Carnivals from Y modules. Or they'd have to be empires that lost their chance, again the early to middle years, like the Borak and Paladine. So, or they had to be in a parallel timeline where the map is entirely different. So, for example, Module C6 comes with alternate maps for both the Parabians and Carnivals to show how differently the Alpha Octant would look had they still been there. But so the overall kind of effect is that basically, if you want to, like when the interregnum came to an end, and ADB pretty much shed its connection to last connection to Task Force Games and became an ongoing publisher in its own right. anyone who wanted to basically add new empires to the setting that would be real empires had to go beyond into either somewhere else in the galaxy or somewhere else in the universe. So, on that note, actually, Paul, do you have the ADB website up on your screen there?
I can bring it up.
Okay.
Okay.
If you go to, just go to the ADB homepage, if you can.
Done.
So, if you click on the Federation Commander the thumbnail, just to go to the FedCommander.com website.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look in the top corner, in the top left corner, there should be one of the buttons you can click says About the Universe.
Got it.
And then if you're on that page, a couple of paragraphs down, there should be a link that says, Want to see our place in the galaxy? Click here.
Okay. Bum, bum, bum. There. Okay. Got it. Okay.
So now, bear in mind that for anyone who's listening, ADB have been releasing their Captain's Log magazine issues for a very long time, well before even Captain's Edition. But in Captain's Log, I want to say it's Captain's Log 27, they, for the first time, introduced the map that Paul is showing on the screen now. Or if he is showing it on the screen by the time I'm talking. But so basically that map and the description pretty much introduced the concept of what the Milky Way galaxy looks like in the Starfleet universe, and what kind of framework it can be built around. So one of the key things that you see on that map are the voids. You'll notice that there's 24 sectors that the galaxy is divided into. So not the kind of quadrants that the franchise uses. Like there's no alpha quadrant, whatever, because that's a post-1979 franchise thing, so ADB can't really use that terminology even if they want to. So instead, the 5 voids basically divide the habitable part of the galaxy into octants. So you can actually see the area that the Fed and Empire map has been superimposed onto the galaxy at large. So, for example, it gives you a sense of, if you're looking at things like the Lyran and Hydrogen off-map zones, that map shows how far there is out there before you hit a barrier, in this case the voids, that stops you from being in the alpha octant and starts you being somewhere else in the galaxy. So basically from, I guess, the year 2000 onwards, those, or whatever year, because CL27 was published after 2000, so I forget what year it was. But in any case, this map basically helps define, like, if you want to put something new and interesting into the universe, into the galaxy, these are the places where they can go. And what it is that makes them not just carbon copies of alpha, like what makes them unique in and of themselves. Now, of course, we don't have time to go into all of that, but for anyone who kind of wants to get a sense of where part of this discussion would be going in terms of, like, over the next several episodes that are covering this topic, this map should help set some of the rules of the road so that people will have an idea about what we're talking about when we get to some of these places in the future.
Yeah, and to me, just looking at the map, the one thing that still is kind of interesting to me is the delta portion of the galaxy, which is past, it's the Lyran and the Hydrogen, past that, will be considered like off-map areas, so, which is has not really been explored because I know that, of course, if in when it comes to some of the Omega stuff. We hear about, going from the ISC, going through the void into the Omega octant. We've heard about stories, had stories about that, but not going past into, the delta portion of the alpha octant.
Well, delta is. No, actually, I should also note that in the most recent update to the Prime Directive role-playing game, Bit for GURPS, they've actually tweaked the map a bit so that the new version, the most recent version of the map, it actually extends the void from the epsilon sector. It basically cuts the delta sector in half. And so it means that the off-map area for the Hydran old colonies cannot actually connect to the Lyran fire stars in delta itself. Because they wanted to basically make sure that there's no way that the Lyrans could try to finish off the Hydrans by going through the fire stars. That they have to basically go through the on-map Hydran kingdom first. So, but that's just a little kind of side thing. So yeah, basically now there is I guess another jumpy forwardy thing is one of the new eras that ADB introduced. Now, of course, this topic deserves an episode in and of itself, but one of the eras that was basically brought into being in the 2000s was the early years, which is basically the two generations of primitive work that exist before the Constitution plans for the Klingon D6 were created. And in that era, ADB introduced two new species that are extinct in the modern alpha octant, but that historically were there, one side or the other. And the Carnivons are one of those two. They are wolf-like species that are genetically related to the Lyrans and Xinties. And their home territory was basically to the northwest of the wind cluster. And when they were defeated, their on-map territory was wiped out. But their rumors have it that there's a group of Carnivons who fled to the coreward part of the Delta sector to the next galactic octant over, the Sargasso region, where they might survive to this day. But actual concrete info on that region of space is still a bit thin on the ground. So, but yeah, so there is, but for the most part, those blank areas, like either in the Delta sector or coreward of Xinti or Gorn space in the Alpha, Beta, and Gamma sectors, are basically there to kind of explain where your survey ships are going when you're sending them into the off-map zones to research in Fenton Empire during the General War. So, but because I guess there's only so much space, but it's still it's fuzzy enough that you don't need to know too much right now as to what's going on there. At least until the Andromeda show up, of course.
Very true. Very true. But yeah, that definitely reminds me about the early years. I forgot about the earlier modules, and not just the early years. One of the things that they also introduced in the early years modules, because actually there was more than one, was and when what year was those introduced? Do you remember? It's been a while.
But the early years, that was back in the early 90s, wasn't it?
Well, there were.
Yeah, I believe the first early
in the late 90s.
I believe the first early years module was released before Task Force Games dissolved.
Well, the thing is, though, is that in the designer's notes in Module Y1, it actually talks about how when the deal was done and ADB became their own development, early years was one of the most heavily sought after products. So it basically was saying that Module Y1 was one of the first products that ADB basically self-published rather than having, because there was like sample ships, like for example, the Klingon D4 and the Federation YCA. People were able to playtest those while Task Force games were still around. But it wasn't until after the interregnum that it was all put together and presented to people as a fully paid and fully counterintuitive module. At least that's my understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when was Interdom?
Actually, a lot of designer notes are consolidated into the Master Rulebook too. So if anyone wants to read them, they can go to some of the back pages of the Master Rulebook, and pretty much all of the modules that have been grouped together in the Master Rulebook, you can read the designer's notes from there.
Cool. Gary, do you remember when the Interdom was? My memory's fading fast when it comes to the actual period of time. And I know it happened during that time. I remember some of the issues related to producing products during that time. I just don't remember when it was.
Well, the only thing is that I myself came into the Starfleet universe after the interregnum, because away from the actual mod products that ADB themselves published, they signed a deal with a video game company called Taldron that released a series of PC games, Starfleet Command. But the Starfleet Command games, they're hybrids. Whereas on the one hand, they have a license from ADB to use the ships and the game mechanics derived from Starfleet battles. But on the other hand, they license from Paramount Pictures the right to use movie-era designs, so in terms of what the ships actually look like. So, for example, they actually managed to get George Takei to narrate as Captain Sulu in Starfleet Command 2. And so when they introduced the IFC in video game terms, he was talking about them in it, like from the perspective of the Federation. Now, of course, his character is off the table for ADB, as are the designs like the Excelsior stuff that were in the video game. But nonetheless, the game did serve, for me at least, it actually served as an introduction to ADB in and of themselves, because it basically helped spark an interest in what it was actually all about, like the source material was all about. But there were actually a few things that people would have to unlearn from the Starfleet Command games when going to the SFU. So, for example, the rights to call the Kazintis is a different agreement than the agreements that other agreements that exist, like with the Franz Josef estate or with Paramount. So I don't think Taldron wanted to pay that. So when they introduced in Starfleet Command 2 an empire that used the Kazinti ships, they didn't call them the Kazintis. They turned them into a dog-like species called the Mirak, and they called them the Mirak Star League. Mm-hmm. So it was still the same ships, like the same designs with the drones coming out and disruptors and so forth, but they were quote-unquote Mirak ships rather than Kazinti ships. So if your first exposure to the Starfleet Universe adjacent material is through those Starfleet Command games, you'd basically have to forget about the Mirak and think of them as the Kazintis instead. So just those kind of little things like here and there. And so basically by the time I came in, it was already after the interregnum, so they were already like starting with some of the things like early years and Omega and so forth. But of course, there's still quite a lot to go after that. But I do believe that there were a couple of newsletters that people were putting together during the interregnum just to kind of like keep things going a little bit until things formally came back through the incorporation. So
right, which happened in 2003. I'm looking at Wikipedia on Task Force Games, and it went out of business in 2003, which I assume at that point was the end of Interdom and when ADB got back publishing rights to Starfleet Battles and those games.
I was under the impression that the deal was signed in like 99 or 98 or something like that, but don't quote me on that, because I'm pretty sure it says it in the if you still have the master rulebook PDF up and running, you can have a look in the you can have a look in the one from module Y1, and it actually, or at least one of the other ones, and it basically talks about when the deal was signed and where things went from there. But I think what there actually is that somewhere on the BBS there is a link that gives you information about, it's like a web page that tells you when everything was published and what edition they're in. So I'm trying to remember where that is. It's like maybe it's on the ADB homepage or the home website. Because there's a thing in there that basically talks about, for example, like when Captain's Edition first came to being, and let's see if it's under L for list of products. This is annoying because I'm pretty sure it's like there's a link to it somewhere, but basically it's like it kind of tells you, like this product first came to existence in 2000 whatever, and then it hasn't had any updates since, or this one was first done in X, and then it became, a new edition in Y, and a new edition again in Z. I forgot where it is now. But
Starfleet, see here, Captain's Log 18 was the first product produced directly by ADB, and it goes on the page that it was the 1999 issue at 112 pages. And I imagine that's a good place to start if you're going into some kind of digital archaeology on this. I know that the last Captain's Log I ever bought was 17 because that was the last one I ever saw in stores.
Yeah, because I think part of the problem, because I think I was suggesting that we start this conversation around the year 2000 or so, is because it's roughly around the same time that things kind of collapsed for FASA with BattleTech, because BattleTech as a game system was actually not gone very long, because not only did the original designer go to the Clicks people and found MechWarrior Dark Age, but there was a company called FanCrow that picked up the license to continue to create BattleTech, classic BattleTech products. So BattleTech has only briefly, if ever, been out of development. But the problem was that so many people, because there was no, people couldn't just Google it back then.
Right.
There was basically sense that in the communities, or in a lot of the gaming stores, that the game system was dead. And so that's actually the same process thing happening now, where people are basically getting back into BattleTech through the various Kickstarters that they're launching, or through the Hairbrain Scheme PC game. And for a lot of people, they're surprised that BattleTech even still exists. So but then it turns out that there's actually been a lot of development in that game system over the last 20-odd years. So I kind of I wonder if it's a similar phenomenon that we're looking at here, where because of the stuff that happened at the interregnum, maybe people kind of fell off at that time, but now interest is rising again. And so, actually I found that page that I was talking about. It says Starfleet Universe Text Catalog. So there's a link to it under C for catalog in the master chart. But if you go there, you can actually scroll through, and it tells you various things like when, let's see now. So, for example, if you want to have a look at the Federation Commander section, that's another topic we should probably hit on in a future episode too, where you'll be able to basically see, when or what modules are available and what they come with and stuff. So I'm just trying to scroll down to the Starfleet Battle section, because there is a massive list in the directory here for all the Shapeways miniatures that have been uploaded since the last few years. And of course, that's yet another topic. Maybe we should just consider this episode as the kind of the prototype where we're kind of like hashing out how we're going to address this going forward, so that we can basically make it.
It's a teaser. That's right. Approach. It's a teaser.
Yeah, we got.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the way of thinking about it.
Yeah, well,
so I'm just trying to actually get to it.
It's a baby step. There you go.
Yeah, well, we've got 30 years of history, 20 to 30 years of history to talk about here. So,
yeah,
and multiple products that never existed before the before the 90s, definitely. But
I'm just checking this list because maybe this is the wrong page, but this page is very in depth. Like, it tells you like all the various R modules and what they are and stuff, but it doesn't give you the update list, because the page I'm thinking about, like, for example, if you scroll to module C2, it'll actually tell you first published blah blah blah, updated whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not there. No, my look, I'll find it like 5 seconds after we hang up. But there is definitely a page like that allows people to kind of get a sense of list of updates or something.
Okay.
Basically lets people know if they have. Oh yeah, update list. I found it. Yeah, you for update list. Sorry, I'm a complete fool. So if you go back to that A to Z master index, scroll down to U, and then you can click on update, and then this one has been updated in May. And so, for example, if you go to basic set, it'll say first printed 1990, rule book revised massively 1994, and again 1999. And the SSC book was revised in 2000. And then it says here, the 1999 Resurrection rulebook ran out of stock during 2005, and we began just with our printing a new rulebook extracted from the SSD master rulebook. Because actually, that's another thing as well, is back in the day, ADB used to have to get a third-party company to print everything that was in paper. So not even just the counters, but also the rulebooks themselves.
Right.
So, but nowadays, they have an internal Kyocera printer that allows them to print the rulebooks on demand. Now, they still have to order the counters from a third party.
Yeah, but
and the color covers, and so forth.
Understood, but them doing it, the printing on demand started after the interim. That's when they bought these big printers so they could actually print the actual rule books in-house. And the only thing they had to actually pre-purchase were the covers, because since they're printing black and white, they had these basically these printers that could print out, just churn out copies of the rule book, and it actually would cost them. It'd be cheaper for them to do that than to actually have a manufacturer who could actually print out all of these rule books, and then have ADB to actually put in the outlay for printing out all these rule books. So they changed to a print on demand model, so that they could actually, as required, they could print out a new copy of the rule book, a copy of the rule book that you needed. Okay, we can print it out, boom. So the amount of stock that they were needed to have, the number of copies they had to have in stock was a lot less. They didn't have to buy 1,000 copies of a rule book and then only sell 500, and then they're stuck with 500 copies, which had to be burned or whatever, because because either there were updates that need to be added to them, or more to the point that they had a new module that might supersede it. And then they had the problem with Starfleet Battle Force, and then they had all these copies, and I think they still have copies of Starfleet Battle Force, which they printed like 20 years ago. It's still, but the thing is, when it comes to Starfleet Battle Force, when it comes to that card game, the graphics still hold up to this day.
Yeah, they do.
Because they're absolutely they're beautiful. What they've got on the cards is absolutely beautiful, and these days the style might have changed a little bit, but I still think but they're beautiful cards, But anyhow, we have to wrap it up for this evening because it is getting late, and I have to put this thing together. And obviously, a reminder that we're not going to have a podcast next week. So those on the podcast feed, sorry, you're going to have to wait after Thanksgiving, and I might put out a little Thanksgiving greeting on the podcast feed so you guys can say a Merry, Happy Thanksgiving from me. But
come back next week.
Yeah. But I will not be actually doing a live recording next week.
With a big a Yule log thing saying we'll be back next week. Holiday symbol. There you go.
Yeah. Actually, this year I'll be streaming all the way through Christmas because Christmas is on that is on a Sunday, right? Or is that on a Saturday? I think it's on a Sunday. If I recall correctly.
No idea.
Don't think
that far ahead right now.
I feel pretty confident in saying December 25th is on a Sunday. So, yeah, on those years where Christmas is on or Christmas Eve is on a Thursday, and so is New Year's Eve on Thursday. That's when I take off for like 3 weeks because it's like neither one of those days am I going to be doing a podcast. But this year is not that way, so don't worry about it. Don't worry about it, guys. We'll have it all the way. We'll have podcasts all the way through December, going all the way into January, and we'll keep going. I've been doing this for over 15 years, and I will continue to do it. So.
Can't argue with results.
Agreed. Gary, it was.
Just
yes.
One final note before we wrap up is just to kind of double back because that update page, I would strongly recommend anyone who basically does want to catch up on how things are going. This is a really good page for that. But to go back to the earlier stuff, it says first printed module Y1, first printed 2000, no revisions, has ADB logos, and then Y2 was in 2008, and then Y3 was in 2010. So, but the only thing is that Y2 and Y3 were done in a different format in the sense that basically it was easy for them to upload the Y2 and Y3 to make them available for people on Warehouse 23. And they also have the infamous Crawford boxes and stuff for telling you things like the service date and stuff. But the Y1, I think, was done before then, so it would need more work to get brought up to the point where it can be uploaded for people to buy as a PDF rather than buying it in paper.
Yeah, the Crawford box is the bane of Steve Petrick's existence.
Oh, I remember the days back when they wouldn't even do a PDF. When Mr. Petrick was totally opposed to any kind of electronic form of the game because of, he was afraid it would be pirated and stuff. I remember those discussions on the old BBS way back in the day.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, the history of the game.
Agreed.
That was a random thought.
Yep. Okay, well, we'll wrap up with that because I have to get sleep, guys. I got to wake up in 6 hours. Because believe it or not, I actually work tomorrow.
That's a 4-letter word ending in K.
Okay, guys. Well, Gary, you have a good night.
Good one. Thanks for having us on.
Okay. Yep. Jeff, you
Yeah,
stay
good
safe
evening.
out there, and you have a good evening.
I'll do it.
Okay,
Dirty
good.
side down.
Okay. Bye. Doug, always a pleasure. You take
Have a good holiday.
Yeah, we'll do, and you too, and take care of my godson. Okay, good night. So, started the journey that we are going to be on for hopefully the next month or so, maybe 3 weeks, maybe 2 weeks. Definitely, I think it's going to be 3 weeks minimum, and hopefully we can continue the journey, because it's going to be interesting, especially for going through the products that have been created throughout the years and the timeline for how when those changes occurred. We haven't even gone into one, which is we obviously are going to need to talk about, is it going to be F&E, because of one of the things that definitely happened, that early on was, of course, the redoing of F&E. That's one thing that happened around the year 2000, is they created a whole brand new version of the rules. And that's part of that history that they is of it. And unfortunately, that seems like an ongoing project evermore, which is updating the F&E rules to make sure everything stays in sync, and especially stays in sync with SFB. So, with that, I am Paul Franz, and I bid you a good night.